Oh boy, today's episode is on fire. Please prepare yourself to challenge everything you thought you knew about relationships. I'm your host, Amie Barsky, and welcome back to the I Come First podcast. Today, Gardner joins us, and his specialty is all about relationships. He works with men and couples all around the world, creating their ideal partnership. He's here to unravel the paradox of selfishness in love. Kelly and I explore the fine line between self-care and narcissism, and why self-trust is a catalyst to confidence and could be a key to deeper connections. We also navigate the uncomfortable conversation around the cultural barriers that keep women from claiming what they need. So tune in for this fresh perspective on connecting to your sensuality without external validation. This isn't your typical self-help talk. It's a provocative journey into the heart of modern relationships. All right, welcome, Kelly Gardner, to the I Come First podcast. I'm so excited to have you here. You have been in my world for quite a few years now and have had a deep impact on my relationship and how I view men in the world, men that are in the work, and men that continue to up-level their lives, whether they're single or in relationships. So I am very excited for you to share your wisdom with us at the I Come First podcast.
Oh, thank you, Amie. It's such a pleasure to be here. I've been such a big fan of your work, how you show up in community and how you show up as a leader. And to have this conversation with you and allow other people to hear it is just such a gift.
Amazing. Will you give us a little quick picture of who you are, where you live in the world, and how you support people?
Sure. I recently moved to Asheville, North Carolina. So I'm in the Appalachian Mountains now on the East Coast. I'm a relationship coach. I work primarily to help men work through the toxic shame of masculinity to build positive relationships and to be heart-centered leaders in their communities. And I also work with my partner to create two-on-two counseling, working with relationship coaching so that men and women can have support on both sides.
I love that. Well, then we're just going to get right to the juicy questions that I'm excited to ask you today, talking about relationships. And specifically, we're talking about romantic relationships. And how would you define healthy selfishness in a relationship? And how does it differ from self-centeredness or narcissism?
Oh, that's a really great question. Thank you so much for bringing that one up. But, I did post a while back ago about the importance of being selfish in my relationship. And what I mean by that is to really look at how is this thing that's showing up in my relationships directly a reflection of me, my experiences in life, and where I am uniquely being triggered, and how can I take responsibility for that? How do I get really curious about whatever's going on in my relationship when I'm in conflict, when there's, a tendency to want to point the finger at the other individual and ask what's going on? How do I get really selfish in that moment and say, wait, before I start pointing the finger at the other individual, how can I look in my own backyard and really look at the patterns that have been running through my life? And how am I actually showing up in this? And that's what I mean by getting selfish, by really getting curious and exploring my own self journey to getting to this place and the patterns that aren't really supporting me. And relationship is the best place to reveal where those patterns have been showing up throughout my life. And I also, work with men and men's groups because it's a little easier for us to see it in that space because with my partner, it's easy to say, well, this, and the other have all contributed to reasons why I feel this way. But when I come into this complete stranger and this person's bothering me about this other thing, then I have to really ask myself, where is this coming from? How do I get selfish about this piece that's showing up in my life? And really briefly, I want to address that question of narcissism because it's something that I think about a lot, particularly as it relates to men. Because it's a notion that's leveled towards men very frequently. And the position I like people to think about really is the compassionate view of the narcissist. To recognize that when I look at the narcissist, the individual who has to create a higher sense of self in order to feel better about who they are, right? And those who are living in and around narcissists experience it as being consistently diminished by that narcissist, right? The other person is putting you down in order to feel better about themselves. But the compassionate view is recognizing that this is a person who's grown up with a very low sense of self-esteem. They're someone that cannot source that sense of self-esteem internally, and so they must source it externally. And so with compassion for that individual, I go, oh, okay. So if I'm not to really look necessarily at how it's directly impacting me does not
Mm,
work for me. Right? But how it's directly impacting them does not work for
yeah.
them either. So how can I get curious about their
Mhm.
life experience and help to ask questions and to understand? I think there's a very famous narcissist in society that people often talk about who might or might not be running for president. And I look at that individual and think what I see from having done so much work with men over, a decade now is a man who's still struggling to receive the love from his father that he never got. And how much of this deep selfish desire is a projection onto other people, my inability to source my own sense of self-esteem and feeling good about who I am.
Wow, this was really thank you for sharing all of this insight. This was really eye-opening for myself included, and I want to circle back to the selfishness thing when it comes to women. Well, I'll speak for myself. First off, I remember my mom saying, "Amy, you're so selfish. Stop being so selfish." And I don't know exactly what I was
Mm,
doing. I don't know what actions or what was happening. I don't remember the circumstance, but I just remember those words a lot. So, what I feel that it taught me was don't put yourself first. Don't be selfish. Put everyone else first. And therefore, I put on that mask of the people pleaser. I put on the mask of be the good girl. And so I
mm,
feel like that was the seed that got planted of like, stop being selfish. You're so selfish. Created this unhealthy relationship
mhm.
with being selfish until I got to unpack all that over the
Yeah.
past, let's say, 10 years or so of my life.
Yeah. And you're bringing up something really beautiful about how we socialize boys and girls
Mm,
differently. And so much of this stems from that early socialization of how I define myself and how I just define a positive sense of myself, right? So, what I hear you saying is that the messaging you received very early is that as a young woman, it was not attractive to focus on
mm.
you, that and underneath that there is a judgment that your value is predicated on your ability to serve other people.
I have been navigating more and more of learning about narcissism because there's a part of me that goes, well, wait a minute, am I a narcissist? Because I was looking at myself going, well, shit, that's stuff I feel like I do sometimes. Do you feel that there is
Yeah.
a slight bit of narcissism in everybody? I know that's kind of a broad
No,
statement.
absolutely. If we look at the classic myth of Narcissus, right? This young boy who is out into the woods looking to find really his path. Who am I and how do I matter? And ultimately rejecting the ones that come towards him. There's this, the story of this nymph that is deeply in love with Narcissus, right? And Narcissus rejects this nymph. And it's kind of this idea of like, you're not good enough for
Mm.
me. I'm not good enough for me. Right. And I think that's the real beautiful story underneath that, right? Which is I'm rejecting the other because I don't feel fully alive in who
Yeah.
I am. I talk a lot about the idea of this loyal soldier. Inside of me, there's this protector that's keeping me safe from any perceived pain that I might
Mm.
experience. And the classic example is I grew up with a parent or someone very close that I desired love from, and they didn't give me the love that I wanted. So I created a story early on that I was unlovable. And this became my loyal soldier that kept everybody at bay. And then somebody comes along and says, I love you. And you go, you must be crazy. I'm unlovable. Like not here, not consciously, but subconsciously, that's what's
Mm.
taking place. So I think that there's an aspect of that in each and every one of us that
Mm.
we're dealing with, which is how can you love me? How can you see this in me? Because I don't really truly see this in myself, and I don't trust you if you do.
Exactly. Exactly. So good. So good. So, what I'm hearing, and for the listener out there who might be in a relationship and questioning if she's in a narcissistic relationship, get curious and remember that there's a little
Yeah.
boy there and a little girl there. There's that dynamic of two
Yes.
inner children wanting the same thing or similar things, but yet can't seem to find it. There's that conflict, or there's that, standing with your arms, like, "Ooh," you're mad, but yet there's that deep desire
Yeah.
to love and connect and have deep intimacy. So I wanted to infuse the curiosity piece, like get curious, ask questions from a loving,
Yeah.
compassionate way. to say, how can I support you? What do you need? What's coming up for you? And I also think that requires a level of safety to ask those vulnerable questions because those can feel very like, whoa, like, how do I even begin to unpack that, you know? So I really wanted to presence that. Is there anything you wanted to say around that
Yeah.
particular topic?
You brought up some really amazing things. And I think one of the things I often really want to tell people is if you believe you're in a relationship with a narcissist, the very last thing that is going to be beneficial is labeling them as a narcissist. Unless they have a diagnosis of narcissistic personality disorder, that's not going to help at all. And the degree to which I can take away those labels and recognize that in every relationship, I'm always determining, am I in relationship with your mature adult or am I in relationship with your adaptive
Mm,
child? Right. And how can I acknowledge those moments when your adaptive child is showing up and find compassion for that part of you in order to have that
yeah.
conversation. And I think that's the part that gets really tricky. And that's where I think oftentimes you benefit from having support to have those conversations. But man, I tell you what, when two people are in the same room and they get to reveal those aspects of themselves in front of their partner, there is almost nothing that I've seen that creates greater connection than seeing that vulnerable little boy, little girl inside of your partner showing up and going, God, yeah, this is what my external asshole is actually trying to do, right? As my little boy is acting out, this is what he so desperately is seeking and doesn't know how to get.
Oh my gosh. And you just totally hit the nail on the head. When I support my female clients who are in relationship, whether it's a marriage or simply, a life partner, or even in new relationships where they're navigating this newness, one of the questions I often ask when we're in our spaces together is what's coming up for you? What's true for you? And how old is that part? We talk about parts work. We talk about
Mm,
the elements of different areas of life, your people pleaser, your good girl, your inner critic, your self saboteur, like what part is here and how old is she? And so we go down
yeah.
this beautiful rabbit hole of uncovering and we play with this part to make sure that this part feels that they're lovable, that they're desired, that they have a purpose, because they do to some degree. It's a matter of, letting them drive the bus or not, because we want our true self to be sitting in the driver's seat of the bus and all the parts can be passengers on the bus, ideally, in a perfect world.
Mhm.
And so it's
Yeah.
really beautiful to hear that these are conversations that get to be had in relationships. And it's not even just romantic relationships, it's also with friendships.
Mhm.
I've had many clearing conversations with friends in ways in which I felt, oh my gosh, this part of me is so present right now. And can I share this with you? And this is what's coming up for
Mhm.
me. And then, we have a conversation. And the next thing you know, like you just said, Kelly, the relationship is that much more loving and
Yeah.
caring and deep and more intimate. And again, it doesn't have to be romantic. And so it's like that's I feel like what we desire as humans. We desire deep, intimate relationships with the people that we truly love and care about, whether it's romantic or not. And
Mhm.
it requires a level of getting real with ourselves and being vulnerable at the same
Yeah.
time.
And the thing that I also like to remind people is the ugliest parts of me come out only with the people I trust the most.
Yep.
And it's really such a challenging thing to recognize and realize that when those deepest, ugliest parts of my little boy show up, it's really because I actually do trust you that you get to see this. And it's unfortunate that you get to see this,
Yeah.
but it is the reality that it's coming up to be worked through, to be
Mhm.
dealt with, and for me to grow so that we can grow together in this relationship.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There's a part of me that wants to go down boundaries right now because of what you just said, because when we do share those deep conversations or those deep parts of ourselves that we might be feeling shame around or fear around, be like, wow, I'm going to let you see all of me. And then that being crossed, maybe that information is used later on when there's another rupture or conflict. So now let's dive into boundaries. Boundaries is an
Hmm.
interesting word because boundaries often feels like, we're blocking somebody out. At least that's what I thought. When I first started learning boundaries, I was like, "Oh, you mean I'm shutting people out and I'm not letting people in?" And I wasn't really versed at what the word meant and how to use it in a way to actually infuse my own yeses and listen to my yes in myself, even though I'm saying no to this person. And not saying no to the person, I'm saying no to what they're offering. And so can we kind of clear up any distinctions you might have around boundaries to begin, and then we'll see where it goes?
Yeah, I think one of the most important things, and I agree with you, this idea of boundaries, they're often used as walls, right? And this wall keeps everybody else out, but it also keeps me in. It's an impermeable membrane. And a good boundary is actually a membrane that allows for connection. And I think the important thing that I always look at boundaries is recognizing that a good boundary does not require your participation in it. It doesn't require you to do anything in order for my boundaries to be kept. It's basically me saying, hey, this does not work for me. And if this continues to work in this way, then these will be the consequences or these will be the actions that I
Mm.
take if this
Mm.
continues. It's not a boundary is not, hey, I need you to sit on that side of the room, or hey, I need you, it's this is what doesn't work for me.
Yeah.
And if that continues, this is the action that I'm going to take as a result.
I think it's really important to communicate what those are. And I also want to clearly state this, that sharing the boundary and holding the boundary are two very different energies in my experience anyway. Because I could say it all I wanted to, but there were points in when I was married over a decade ago where I would say the thing and I didn't have the courage or the strength to hold it. I felt so bad. I felt guilty. My good girl came up. Oh, I gotta, my people pleaser. And I couldn't hold that boundary. I was so afraid of
Yeah.
rejection. I was so afraid of abandonment that it crippled me.
Yeah, I hear that. And, I think I see this as a parent as well. The positive reflection that I get to see as a parent is it cripples my children when I don't hold that boundary.
Mm,
When I say, hey, if this happens and, this continues to happen, this will be the result of that happening. And I don't hold that boundary, that has a negative impact on their development. And I have to imagine that that has a negative impact on my partner's development as well. And more importantly, the development of our relationship
yeah.
when I'm not holding.
Yeah. What I feel like for me, when I wouldn't hold my boundary, when I reflect back now, it hindered my self trust to trust myself to keep my word. And so, in my opinion, self trust also has to do with confidence, and I think confidence is a learned thing when it comes from I trust myself. I trust I can be my word. I trust my intuition and things like that. And for me, I would say the boundary and it wouldn't be honored. And I just didn't have that courage, And so I really feel like that diffused, if that's even a word, the trust I had in myself. It started to really just dwindle down and
Mhm.
down. And I just shrunk and shrunk smaller and smaller. And I was not in a healthy place in regards to coming back to my own selfishness to take care of myself.
Yeah. And the resentment
Oh,
that's
yeah,
built in that place of,
sure.
of not, there's nothing that builds greater resentment than not showing up for
Mm,
me.
yeah. Self abandonment.
And like I can do it, I can keep doing it, I can keep doing it, but it is inevitably going to build
Hmm.
resentment when I don't show up to the things that I say that I want to do, the things that I say that I'm committed to. When I sell myself out, resentment is there.
Absolutely. Amazing. Okay. I want to jump to this next question if you're open for it. I'd like to know, in your experience, what's the most common barrier that's preventing women from prioritizing their own needs in relationship and how they can start to overcome that from a man's point of view? Because a lot of women, self included, feel guilty to
Mhm.
take time for myself or do things for myself. And so, from a man's point of view, how can a woman really prioritize their own needs and not feel guilty?
Yeah, it's such a complex and difficult situation because I think first and foremost, the thing that pops in my mind is briefly what we discussed earlier, which is impact of our socialization as young boys and young girls, and how
Mhm.
much young women are taught that your value in relationship is around how much you're able to support your partner, how
Mm.
much you're able to give to the relationship. And it's so deep, it's beyond my cognition or my realization that it's my deep desire to support, to be there in relationship has been communicated as the thing that I must do. And so, what I want women to know on the other side from a man's point of view is we experience that absence of you doing for yourself as detrimental to the relationship as well.
Mm.
My partner oftentimes will come to me and say, hey, I'm so sorry. I really need to do this thing. Please, please. thank you. First and foremost, thank you for asking for what you need. And second, please, I really want you to get that, because when you do get that, I I feel so much better.
Mhm.
I feel your presence so much more when you're getting that thing that fills you up.
Mhm.
I feel that you're so much more available in this relationship
Mhm.
when you're filling up those things.
Mm.
And when it is placed back on the relationship as, oh, let's if I meet this here, then the relationship will meet that need for me as well.
Mm.
Sometimes that can be an extra added weight on the relationship that creates more
Yeah.
tension.
And it's interesting. I don't know if you were using your partner's exact words, but one of the first words you said was, "I'm sorry, but I need to, or I want to." She's saying the word "I'm sorry" first, like she's
Hmm.
apologizing for it, and I do that myself,
Yeah.
and I get
Well,
it.
my partner's Canadian, so she has to apologize. It just comes with the program, and it's deep, and
It
it's like
really
double,
is.
because it is both a cultural piece as well
Okay.
as a gender
Mhm.
piece, which is, part of the socialization as well.
Mm. I really wanna dive into this sense of sensuality and sexuality and feeling sexy and feeling connected to that, and so I'm curious, how can a woman cultivate a sense of sensuality and self-worth that's independent of their partner's validation or even social standards?
Oh man, that's a great question. I've been kind of diving deeply into this question because I had a client come to me and said, you know, I feel really sexy on the inside, but on the outside, I don't feel like it's matching. And it
Mm.
started this real deep dive for me around, what does it really mean to feel that way inside and out? And I think that there's a combination here. Some school of thoughts would say, well, you just got to feel it, and it really doesn't matter what's going on the outside. Now look at this from both the physical aspect, but also the emotional aspect, as well as the spiritual aspect. Like, where am I feeling fully alive in my life?
Mm.
And I think that it's really examining those aspects and going, do I feel really fulfilled? Do I feel a sense of, I've done the best that I can in these different areas of my life, and I'm good with me in having done that? Because so often, I think, when that's not present, the need is then to outsource that validation from the outside. Now, listen, none of us live alone. None of us live completely, in a vacuum. And it's not to say that I have to feel fully sexy by myself without anybody else ever reflecting it.
Mm.
But it's kind of a chicken or the egg question, right? Is
Yeah.
anybody else actually going to positively reflect it? Certainly the people that I want to reflect it, if I'm not emanating that for myself, right?
Mm.
And I think that the versions that we receive from others, when I know truthfully in myself that I'm not expressing that,
Mm.
ends up landing flat and reinforcing aspects of myself
Mm.
that really aren't truly my sexiest version of me.
I love this. I wanna touch on the societal standards for a second
Mm,
because I've had clients, work with a lot of women, and some of them are moms. And, when you have children, your body goes through different phases and even in life, just in general. Now, I don't have children. However, I've noticed I'll be 51 tomorrow, right? And so
mhm,
my body has definitely changed in the past few years, specifically with perimenopause and menopause and all of the hormonal changes. It's been massive. And so, from a man's perspective, I have a client, she'll say, my husband says he doesn't care that my body's changing, but she's not convinced. So, she's
mm,
shutting down her own desire for intimacy because she just doesn't feel good in her physical body. From a
mhm.
man's perspective, tell me about like how women like, just speak the truth because I feel like
Yeah.
sometimes we just don't hear it and we just knock it over our heads, will you? Like,
Yeah. Let me give you the upside, the downside, right?
okay.
The downside is that we as men are a product of our socialization just as much as you are products of your socialization, right?
Mm.
And so there's stories that we have driven in the back of our head about what our partner is supposed to look like, or what we're supposed to look like for that matter, that do become part of the conversation, right? That's my little boy running the show. That my little boy was told what would give him a positive sense of self-esteem.
Mm.
That does show up. But for when a man is in his mature adult self, which is hopefully what you're seeking to engage in sexually, right? I don't want the boy, I want the man.
Mm-hmm.
When the man is present, I can speak to myself and the men that I work with and what they've shared. It's like your presence, your believing in you, like that is the sexiest thing that actually shows up. It's like this chicken or egg question. It's if you don't feel good about your body, that is going to be projected into the space. And so what we're responding to more than anything else is how you feel about you. And when you feel sexy about you, it's easy to enroll us in the idea that you feel sexy about you. That's a misconception that there has to be some ideal physical form. And that's more when you're appealing to the little boy inside of us. But when you're appealing to the adult man is lit up by you being your full expression of you, feeling sexy, feeling alive, feeling that you are enough. That is like the most attractive thing that I can experience.
I love that. And for the woman who's listening right now and maybe doesn't feel 100% in her body, and honestly, I don't think any woman ever always feels 100%. We have our moments, we have our cycles, we have all the things. But for that person, self acceptance of what is
Mhm.
can be the greatest gift to freedom. And if I don't like something, if you don't like something, what are you willing to do to change the situation?
Yeah.
Because I think there is a level of ownership that gets to be had when we're not happy with something, whatever that
Yeah.
might be, whether it's your health, your hair, your bank account, your relationship, your schedule, whatever that thing is that you're not satisfied with, if you're not taking ownership of it and seeking other ways in which to start to move it and design it in a way that you actually, okay, this feels good for me, then it's an interesting playground.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I think you really landed it. It's both how I feel about myself, but also I think that these things, each and every one of them reveal an aspect of myself where I know I'm not fully showing up for myself. I
Mm,
said I'm going to do this workout, but I didn't do it. I said I was going to do this thing, but I didn't do it. And those areas where I am not showing up for myself, I think that's the most important thing that gets highlighted when I attempt to do any of these tasks that I might think are
mhm,
going to bring me a greater sense of self.
mhm,
But if I'm not following through with them,
mhm,
what's really showing up in there? Am I setting goals that I don't really believe in? What's really showing up here? And how does that reflect the creation of my sense of self that is
mhm.
so important?
And I feel like this is coming full circle. We're back to self-trust. We're totally back to self-trust. Am I being my
Absolutely.
word?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Like, when I ask people, like, what's the thing that really communicates sexiness more than anything else? And the number one answer I got most of the time was confidence,
Mm.
you know?
Okay. So I know we're about to wrap up. However, for you, define what is confidence to you? What does that mean?
Mm. It's a tricky one, because when I say confidence, I mean a positive sense of self that I am no better than or less than anybody else.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. I love that. And for me, there's layers to it. I feel like if sense of confidence is an inside out job, right? And so if I had zero money in the bank, would I still be who I am? Would I still show
Mhm,
up the way I show up? If I lost my home, if I lost all the people around me, if everything crumbled, how would I still show up?
mhm.
And that to me is a level of confidence that is almost unshakable.
Yeah.
It's definitely that the energies of like, who am I in the world? How do I want to show up regardless of what's happening outside of
Mhm,
myself? Can I stay in my truth? Can I stay in my integrity? Can I stay in my values? Can I stay aligned with my standards? And not to say, again, we're still human. We're still gonna fuck
oh, yeah.
up. And when that does happen, clean it up, take the ownership, and then get back in the game, play in the arena. Don't be a
Mhm.
fan of your life. Be in the arena and like play the game,
Mm,
you know? I love it.
absolutely. Yes, that. You know? That's really the key. It's like, how do I keep coming back to this is happening for me, period. This challenge is conflict. This is happening for me, is giving me an opportunity to learn
Mm,
and to grow. And as long as I'm continuing to do those two things,
mm,
I'm going to keep feeling a little bit better about myself each and every day.
yeah, exactly. I love it. Mm, juicy. All right. Well, whew, we could talk all day long. How can people reach you? What's the best way for them to reach
Uh,
out to you and send a DM and say, "Hey, I heard your episode on I Come First podcast and it was amazing." All the things.
Best place to reach me is on Instagram. I am Kelly Gardner, KELOYGARDNER. I'm really in this practice right now. Someone told me this recently that social media is supposed to be a telephone and not a television. So I'm
Oh,
really interested in how do I actually reach out and talk to people through social media,
I like that.
engage and actually have real conversations. So if you find me there, please say hello. I want to actually have a conversation with people.
I love it. I love that. That's amazing. So good. And is there anything else you want to share with our listener before we say goodbye?
I'm excited about this new program. I'm putting together the Sexy Six right now.
Ooh.
What are the six aspects that really bring us into our most vibrant, attractive self? And looking at some challenges in the near future. So if you find me there, tell me you're interested in a challenge, and we're going to be sharing some challenges, talking to experts on how can we really level up in all of these aspects of our life. So please look for that in the future.
Well, you heard it right here, everyone. The Sexy Six is just around the corner. So connect with Kelly. Thank you, Kelly, so much for this beautiful conversation. There was so much value here for myself and all of our listeners. And thank you for joining us. Have a beautiful
Thanks
day.
to you. You too. Take care.